Welcome to this Housing Ombudsman Centre for Learning podcast. I am Jeet Sopal and I am one of the Sector Learning and Development Apprentices at the Housing Ombudsman Service. This is the third of our three-part podcast about our latest Spotlight report on repairs and maintenance, Repairing Trust. For the first part of this podcast, we met with Zoe Miller, Insight and Systemic Manager here at the Housing Ombudsman Service, and we talked about no access. In the second episode, we were joined by Chris Harrison, Insight and Systemic Lead, who wrote the report with Zoe. During that episode, we explored the findings relating to behaviours, trust, and codes of conduct. In this episode, we are pleased to be joined by both Chris Harrison and Zoe Miller, and today we are going to be exploring the findings relating to quality assurance. If you've listened to the previous podcasts, you'll be familiar with Chris and Zoe, but would you both like to introduce yourselves before we get started?
Sure. Hello again. I'm Zoe, and I'm one of our managers in the Insight and Development team. And as you mentioned, Chris and I worked on Repairing Trust together.
And hello again. I'm Chris Harrison. I'm an Insight and Systemic Lead here. I think I gave a garbled background of my my career last time we spoke, but I've worked in social housing since 2007, joined the Ombudsman in 2013, various casework roles. I was the data analyst for a bit, and I'm now trying to bring all of that into Insight world.
Thank you very much, Chris and Zoe. Now, as I mentioned, we're looking at quality assurance today, and that is because over 40% of our respondents to our call for evidence rated the standard of work carried out in their homes as poor, with more residents contacting them about repair issues. 33% of the residents who responded to the call for evidence perceive a lack of quality assurance activities being carried out by the landlord during and after works. We saw requests for enhanced regulation and consequences for landlords who failed to provide sensible repair and maintenance services. The report calls for a stronger focus on quality assurance. What does that look like in practice, and where should organisations start?
Yeah, I'll answer this one. So both of these depend on the landlord's own starting point. For example, the obvious place to start with is a quality assurance procedure. And we saw in our casework that many landlords don't seem to have one, meaning there's uncertainty about what to do when quality issues are raised. Naturally, if a landlord already has one of these, the starting point is going to be different. And that's going to be more about making sure that process is fit for purpose, that it's accessible to staff and residents, that it's shared with contractors and operatives, and that it's being adhered to. For example, is it referenced at procurement stage so the expectations and standards are clear? And is it used as a performance management aid? We've seen different ways of quality assurance procedures implemented. Some landlords use inventories as an audit trail, whereas others prefer more visual aids such as photographic or video cameras. It's important consent's part of any procedures involving those. And in the report, we reference an example of a landlord who offered a settling in visit to a resident after major works. So this was part of the landlord's quality assurance process because it wanted to set that time aside to meet with the resident and talk through any quality concerns, including any damage to the property or the resident's belongings. And although this is, of course, potentially quite time intensive, the idea is that it helps to address any issues in a timely manner and then helps to prevent complaints being raised further on. And there is that preventative aspect to quality assurance. So of some of the 40% that you reference, that includes examples of the incorrect contractor or operative being sent out on a job. For example, tilers expected to fit carpet and so forth. And although we didn't see that in all the cases we reviewed, we did see examples of some contractors and operatives attempting to do work that they're not experienced or competent in. And in those instances, a poor outcome has a sense of inevitability about it.
Thank you for that, Zoe. I like the fact that you referred to the landlord who offered the settling in visit to the resident as part of their quality assurance process. See, I think this is a great example of quality assurance since it involves a resident and it lays the foundation for that quality of communication right from the outset. I also like the preventative aspect of quality assurance that you mentioned, as this shows a proactive approach on the landlord's part. Bearing this in mind, there is a lot of mention of compensation within the report, especially in respect of claim farmers who encourage pursuit of legal claims and compensation. Do you think people will see the findings of the report as trying to create a compensation culture?
This is a really interesting one because we were asked a similar question when we did our report launch webinar, and it wasn't a question that we expected at the time, because to us, we think we're clearly not advocating for it. But that's one of the reasons we like doing the webinars and Q&As, because it helps to challenge our thinking, and perhaps we hadn't been clear enough about that. So with that, compensation can be part of the quality assurance process, such as compensating for damaged belongings. The key point that we make in this section in the report is about evidence rather than compensation per se. So not a compensation culture, but an evidence culture. And we cite examples in the report of landlords who cannot prove or disprove a resident's belongings were damaged during repairs or maintenance. So they pay compensation to resolve the matter. And although that might be positive in terms of a conciliatory approach, it's also expedient that it isn't necessarily the right course of action. And we're absolutely not suggesting landlords pay compensation when they haven't done anything which requires compensating for. But what we are saying is you need to have a system in place which allows you to investigate a quality assurance concern and be confident in your findings, whether that be in the resident's or the contractor's favour.
And this is where an efficient knowledge and information management, KIM for short, a KIM system, would come into play.
Yes.
Having a well-maintained KIM system can help considerably in cases like mentioned above, where landlords may be exploited for compensation. So this then takes us into data and technology. What role does data and technology play in improving repairs and maintenance outcomes?
I think this is an area we will see quite a lot of innovation. We were told of some areas of progress during our investigation and research. Self-diagnosing boilers always comes to mind because we heard from contractors how helpful they find these, probably because they're sent a report, which is a helpful starting point for them in terms of whether a visit is required, how urgent, what equipment they might need to take with them. So those simple time savings, such as being able to knowing that you need to take some batteries for the thermostat and get the issue addressed all in one visit. Other landlords and contractors spoke more about the system side of things and how this is improving outcomes. For example, a shared digital platform where the landlord and contractor have access to the same information. And this has the potential to alleviate some of the common areas of frustration we see, such as that lack of information about risk, not having information about the details of the job history, and the resident's individual circumstances.
That concept of self-diagnosing boilers, it's quite the game changer, I would imagine, and certainly has its advantages. From what I understand, these boilers, they're equipped to continuously monitor their own performance and identify faults, and then they display a specific error code when something affects safe operation. That should make a contractor's work considerably easier. Landlords and contractors having a portal where they can easily share information with each other about risk assessments, job history, and residents' individual circumstances can only really help to make quality assurance that much more efficient. Talking about efficiency, are there any case studies in the report where poor quality assurance led to a breakdown in trust of the resident and landlord relationship?
Yes. Well, one of them springs immediately to mind. It's in the report as more of a sort of a contract management issue, but the quality assurance has to be a part of that. So I will bring it up. It's Mr. R on who lives on page 39 of our report. There were a few things went wrong in that case. in a contract management theme, but one was definitely down to poor quality work and a lack of any assurance. So Mr. R has a physical disability, and used a chair in the shower in his bathroom. One of those, it was a folding chair attached to the wall. It's quite a common aid or adaptation. So, yep, fine. Landlord instructed contractors to replace the bathrooms on the estate. The bathrooms were knocking on a bit. That's also fine. And during that work, the shower chair had to be detached from the wall so the contractor could do the work it needed to do. Again, not a problem in itself, but obviously Mr. R needed it to be put back when the new bathroom was completed. But despite having taken it off the wall to do the work, the contractor refused to put it back, claiming it wasn't their responsibility. Which struck me as slightly odd. It's not their responsibility to put things back as they found them, apparently. But that meant Mr. R couldn't use his shower. And it was 3 weeks before the landlord got his contractor to do the reasonable thing and put the chair back on the wall. So Mr. R's trust was already impaired. I think had there been a quality check or a post-inspection, the landlord would have picked up on that sooner and maybe sorted it out. Somebody on site, resident liaison officer, might have helped in that situation. Even that the settling in visit that Zoe was talking about earlier on, something like that would have helped at the end of the work. But none of that happened. So at any rate, I think the landlord should have satisfied itself that it had restored the bathroom to a usable condition for its resident, but it didn't. Eventually, the contractor was ordered to reattach the chair, which it did. But there was evidently no quality check on that work either. And guess what? The chair fell off the wall while Mr. R was using it. So injured him in the process, caused damage to that shiny new bathroom. And that, there goes the trust again. Despite that being reported immediately and the subsequent repair being marked as urgent, there was another spectacular delay before it got put right. It was more than 5 months in total before Mr. R could use the shower in his home again. He was forced to go elsewhere to bathe, which is just horrible. There was a pretty disgraceful set of circumstances. I think had a quality assurance process been baked into the contract and the landlord's policy and procedure, and had that been followed, importantly, I think that entire situation could have been avoided. But as it stands, horrible.
Wow. I'm actually speechless.
Yeah.
That has to have been an absolutely horrific experience for the resident. You see, I have mobility issues myself, and just stepping into the resident's shoes, I can absolutely empathize with them. And yes, absolutely, that is a huge impairment of trust on the contractor's part right from the start. But then to completely forgo any quality checking once the remedial work was done. As you say, it comes down to the quality assurance not being baked in, which, had it have been and followed, then it should not have or would not have resulted in such a terrible experience for the resident. So with such an experience and others similar to it, how can landlords and contractors better use resident feedback as part of their quality assurance process?
I think the key is listening. So landlords often ask residents to complete a survey to gauge their satisfaction with work carried out. It's pretty common. Doesn't matter how big or small the job is, that you're very likely to at least get a text message, if not be asked to fill out a survey while the work's ongoing or just as the contractor leaves. So that information is there. Landlords are often collecting it. Contractors are collecting it. It's part of the contract. But there's a sense from residents reading our call for evidence survey that their responses to those surveys just go into a black hole and aren't acted on. Whether or not that's true, that's the perception. So, if a resident working in a landlord's office and getting those survey responses in is such a key job. So, if a resident responds to one of those surveys and says they're not satisfied, that's worth exploring on an individual case level. Now, there might not be anything you can do to improve the work in that individual case. Benefit of the doubt, though. I think is a good approach. But if you can't do anything, then maybe there's something else going on. So maybe the quality of the work is good enough, is what you expect your contractor to do, but maybe it didn't match the residents' expectations. In which case, that tells you that your expectation management needs to be better. Maybe it didn't meet residents' aspirations versus expectations, and in that case, you can feed that response into your operational strategic decision making. Try and consider what if anything you can do to raise the bar to get closer to those aspirations. We talked in previous podcasts about involving residents in procurement. That's a good way of sort of measuring aspirations and keeping that feedback loop alive and working towards improving the standard and quality of work that goes on. There's all sorts of things you can do if a resident scores you 1 out of 5 on quality of work, but the response needs to be proportionate and constructive. But the worst thing you can do is ignore it. That just denigrates trust even further. So yeah, the message is listen, and fold that resident feedback into, squeeze it for all it's worth. It's my advice there.
And this is it, isn't it? If the resident has put in the time and effort to give you their feedback, then don't be that black hole that residents are afraid of. Whether it is good or bad scoring, it doesn't matter. Don't ignore their feedback. Acknowledge it, be responsive and constructive, as you mentioned, but also ensure that you manage expectations so that residents know and understand the service and level of service you can provide. Looking ahead, how will you measure the success of this report's impact across the sector?
Well, as we do with all our spotlights, we carry out an evaluation of the report about 18 months after publication. So that involves asking landlords what changes they've made, any changes they intend to make as a result of the report and the recommendations that we made. And we take all of those responses, and we produce a follow-up report. So we'll share that through our Centre for Learning. And the focus of that is what's working well for some landlords. What have landlords told us is working well as a result of the report and the recommendations that we made. We use that obviously to try and encourage other landlords to consider whether there's something they can adopt in there. We'll also look at our casework data, so to see, are we seeing the recommendations and the report implemented in practice, and is it helping? We'll look at other measures as well. We'll look at how many times the report's been downloaded, the attendance at our webinars, use of our e-learning materials, anything we see in the trade press. We've got people monitoring social media and things like that. So there's lots of measures, and hopefully sometime towards the end of next year we will have a follow-up report ready to share, to really show the impact of what we're doing. And it's, we love seeing it work. We work really hard to arrive at recommendations that are, things that can be implemented and that can make improvements, and we worry and we reword and we think really carefully about what we should be saying and how to say it and what's useful. So we love to see the fruits of that labour.
And that blends in quite well with the work that we do in learning and development, with the webinars that we host, where the emphasis is lessons learned, where we, the landlord, where we are now, following recommendations from HOS, and then sharing that same knowledge and experience to other landlords so that they can follow a similar example and improve process and practice on their side. Chris, Zoe, thank you very much for your time today. Your knowledge and candor throughout this series of podcasts has been amazing and is greatly appreciated. I'm sure those listening will share my sentiments. That wraps up this series of podcasts on repairs and maintenance. I'm feeling quite sad now that it has come to an end, as I really feel like we have bonded through this work. I am sure there'll be more to come. A big thanks to everyone for listening. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.